Kings Island is filled with good times that were meant to be shared. Before another summer slips away, make plans to spend a day together with family and friends that you'll remember for a long, long time. And that's any day at Kings Island. Hello, everyone. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are and that's who we care about. Yeah, this
So,
summer
Ryan,
went
yeah,
fast. We
it
both,
did, yeah. It's slipping away. We're down to just 2 weeks of daily operation. It's going to end on August 18th, so we're already at that point in time, and the daily 10 p.m. closes coming to an end on August 10th. August 11th to the 15th, the park is going to close at 8 p.m. Uh, it's going to be closed August 19th through the 22nd, closed August 26th through the 29th, open for weekend operation with 5 o'clock opening times on the Fridays, August 23rd and August 30th, and we're here at Labor Day weekend. And that's pretty much it for the summer season. So, where did it all go, Ryan? I guess, as they say, time flies when you're having fun.
yeah, most certainly does. And it's funny because I've always felt like as soon as you get used to the park being open daily, that's when it's like, oh, and daily operations ends in 2 weeks. It goes fast.
It does. And, and the thing that really always strikes me is I remember, my early years as a pass holder back in the 80s that you had the full month of August.
Mm-hmm.
The hours weren't shortened. It was still open until 10 p.m. And then that it was pretty busy all the way up until that last week of August going into Labor Day weekend. And that was considered by the park officials and the associates out in the park what they considered dead week. And that was a great time to come if you were a pass holder because minimal wait time for all your favorite attractions. So everyone was waiting about an hour or so for the Beast every day back in that era to ride. Might be 10 minutes during that week. I had some of my best days riding the racer on that dead week and that. So that was always a time that I looked forward to. And, then in, the more recent years, you get to mid-August and not only are the hours, shortened where it's closing at 8 o'clock, but then it's just not open at all again until the weekend. So, there's still a lot of families in that like to travel and go on vacation and do things, in mid to late August. And, the options are, we're not just talking about Kings Island, but other things. They're just not open anymore.
Do you think it's because of earlier school start times, or do you think it's because they looked at a week or two there like, yeah, we're only kind of breaking even. Let's not do this.
Combination of both, because other parks, that do remain open, they're dealing with the same struggles. Schools are still opening in other, cities and states and that. So they just, they figure it out. They find other ways to recruit, an older workforce and things. So there are ways around it. If you really wanted to remain open, you could. But, I get it in that. But, schools and when my senior year of high school, August 26th or something like that, 27th was when we went back to school. Mm-hmm. And that was the earliest that I ever started back to school. So now, there's schools that are opening next week.
Yes. Actually, I saw on social media, Brad from KI Central posted something because he's not a teacher, but he works for a school district in Indiana. And he was saying, the first day of my 20-something season with the school district, staff starts today and the students start on Wednesday. Well, I guess today is Wednesday. It's not August yet as of this recording. How crazy
so, but like I'm talking about next week as of the time this drops, which is going to be on Monday, right? So that week, schools start opening. I know my daughter and her husband, they're teachers, and they have to report back August 7th or 8th. And then the next week, the kids are back in class. And it's just earlier and earlier. And you get schools in Indiana, start earlier than ever before. It's just, amazing that, how that has changed the dynamic. There used to be, it was out in Virginia, where King's Dominion was called King's Dominion law, where the schools couldn't open until a certain time. But now I think they do open a little bit, earlier than they used to. because Kings Dominion, same situation. They're not open daily anymore all the way through Labor Day like they were, not too many years ago.
My understanding is that they still do have that law on the books, but there has been pushback. I'm not certain of that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Here's an idea. This is from like the total like economist in me, but I feel like what would be best for like a lot of these places that rely. I mean, I guess the counter to this would be that like childcare is expensive, so when the kids are in school, that's relief for the parents. But it would be cool if they went back to Memorial Day through Labor Day, because the reason why they started earlier is for snow days. It doesn't snow as much anymore, if you haven't noticed. But also, we kind of mastered the whole like teaching from home thing. So why not just do that if it snows? Then you don't have to have snow days built in,
Well, I would think that at some point it might get back to that, to where the kids are out Memorial Day, they go back right after Labor Day, that Wednesday after Labor Day. That's the first day of school. I could see that, but I don't think it'll happen, over the next 2-3 years. But, ultimately maybe it does. And I think for the attractions industry, that would be great, because I think they all really do want to be open. The parks that you see closed, Kings Island included, those last couple of weeks in August. But it's just so tough, with the majority of your staff that's operating the rides and the games and the food and the merch shops, admissions, parking. A lot of them are, high school students, and it just makes it tough.
It does. And to be clear, though, for those who haven't like run the numbers, if the park is open and it's let's say it's breaking even. I don't really know what the break-even point is of Kings Island or any other park, but let's say there's enough in there so they're breaking even. That puts them in a way better situation from being closed, because when they're closed, the park is hemorrhaging money, because that means that everybody's getting paid, all the maintenance is being done, all the lights are being powered, all this, all that, but not a dollar of revenue is being made.
Yeah, but I think you also have to look as to what you could have open. So you could still have, some pretty good, decent attendance during the week, those last 2 weeks in August, but you would not be able to have everything open. And then that's just not a great experience for a lot of the guests either. If you go and you only have the Beast, Orion, Diamondback, and Mystic Timbers open among your coasters, because that's all you can staff. So I think that all factors into it, Ryan.
It probably does. And there's probably some sort of solution in there, like bare bones nights for Halloween Haunt comes to mind, where it was like, we're open through the week of Halloween, but to be clear, it's the Halloween mazes and it's these 4 rides. Was that well received? You never did it again.
Never did it again. You had a lot of the full-time staff out in the park, staffing the games, working the restaurants, working some rides, and that. Mm-hmm. It was tough. There just wasn't, and then you didn't have enough of the scare actors even, because they were still in school, or because of certain, laws and stuff, they only work so late on a school night. That's the other part that comes in, is why are you closing at 8:00 right now? Well, kids can't work past, I think it's like 9:00 or something on a school night, so there's a lot of reasons for that. It's a different ball game than when you and I were growing up, Ryan.
You and I grew up in completely different eras, just for the record.
Yeah, when I grew up, there was no reason why on a Wednesday night, school night, I couldn't work till 11:30 at night. There was nothing in place.
Well, we had law, and Ohio has weird laws with minors where they have to take breaks during certain time frames, or else they minor violate, and it has to be reported to the state, in which the company gets fined, and if they don't report and there's an audit, and that's a big thing for Kings Island. But like you said, the reality is, if they hired an older crowd or something, think like Dollywood or something, then they could alleviate the problem if they wanted to go that route. And Dollywood is, again, an example. There's not a huge population around it, so it's not like it's plumb in the middle of New York City, so it's easy to find people. A lot of the people that work there live kind of far away. There's a woman that I was talking to at the entrance to Aunt Granny's that was the greeter there, and we kind of struck up a conversation because she's from around here, like the Northern Kentucky area, and she said she lived about 50 minutes away from Dollywood. So they may obviously make it an attractive work environment. They make it a place where people want to be. And they make some sort of benefit where adults who are of retirement age or whatever, whatever their situation is, want to show up to work there. And they would have to do something like that if they wanted to have an expanded calendar.
Yeah, but it's just, it is frustrating, for the guests that, love going to Kings Island. And, you really get rolling in the summer, and it's almost like it comes to a screeching halt, while there's still plenty of summer left.
Yeah. And then, I pulled this up on the calendar, like, look, so they start being closed, Thursday the 22nd is the last day they're closed before they start opening. So this is August. So August 19th through the 22nd, they're closed.
Right.
And then they open at 5 on Friday the 23rd. This doesn't affect me too much. I'm mainly a weekender now. I get in there a week every once in a while, but not as often as I used to. But it is kind of sad. But honestly, I think that there would be more of an argument for expanding the season in the other direction later, like March and April and stuff. You'd have to accommodate it. But if they want to do, something more with attendance or something like that, then that would be the direction to go. Somebody submitted a listener question, and let's not answer it now because I do want to use it. His name's Corey, and he asked, what would Kings Island need to do to be a 4 million park as opposed to a 3-point-something million park? And I think that would be one of the solutions there is, try to find creative ways to be open earlier,
Yeah, it's such it's a little bit more, predictable what your weather's going to be in some places, Kings Dominion, Carowinds, than what it would be in the Cincinnati area. Sometimes in March, it barely gets above, 35, 40 degrees. And there's other years where it's already 70 something degrees, so you just never know what you're going to get then. So I think in that respect, it's a little hard to open too much earlier than what they do. Maybe you could go, that first weekend in April would be about when you could start getting another weekend or two in of operation. Maybe go another weekend or two in November before you transition to the haunt. Or maybe you could go all the way through and do the weekend operation until haunt. And sure, on those Saturdays and Sundays when guests come, on those weekends, some of the haunt things are still, being put up in that, and the park doesn't look great, but, people can still ride some rides, eat some food, and, go through the shops and that. They're still going to have a good time. You could have some limited operation hours, 11 to 7 or 11 to 5 or something on those Saturdays and Sundays. So you could add some days to the calendar, where, and especially now it's become the last 10 years or so. Those early weekends in November, it's usually beautiful out.
A lot of the other parks, Kings Dominion, Carowinds come to mind, they're open, not necessarily in September when the sellouts are. I'm not sure what their schedule is for something like that. But between Halloween and Christmas, that's when they have like their peanut celebration and stuff. So there's definitely a filler that can be done there. They just choose not to,
Yeah, and I would love to see it. And, and I'm always, in favor, if you can add operating days to your calendar, that's just added value for your, your guests, your pass holders, and if you can, you should certainly do that. And we do see some parks out there that, they've been adding, going into August, they're adding, extra hours. Dollywood added, back in the spring, they added many, many more days and hours to their calendar, more than they've ever had before. So you can find ways to make it happen. I'd like to see it.
Right. And that's what's kind of telling me that this is one of those things where, could they do 4 million people? I think so. I think if they had a solid year on top of putting the effort into something in the early season, as well as, having the weekends open in between, the end of haunt and the beginning of Winterfest, like I think the numbers could math there, but I don't think that there's a lot of desire to grow the park the way that, there was that desire in the past. But I digress. Don, tell me about Tower Topics t-shirts.
Tower Topics t-shirts. It is a must-have for fans of the show. we have them available. They're just $22. You can purchase them by just simply sending us a direct message on our X. It's Tower_Topics. We'll send you the QR code to make the purchase. They're $22. That includes shipping. Comes in whatever size you may need. Comes in a Carolina blue, and we'll send you that code. And as soon as the transaction has been complete, it just takes a matter of days to get the shirt. And we've sold more shirts than you and I think, expected when we first made those shirts available. It's always great to see, guests when we run into them at Kings Island, or they show us pictures of them wearing them wherever they may be. So it's always great to see. But yeah, if you are interested in a shirt, just let us know and we'll get you taken care of.
Yeah, $22 including shipping. We love to see them around the park. All right, we'll be right back with the listener questions. Okay, first listener question, Bud W. from the west side of Cincinnati. Coney Island had a racetrack next to it, River Downs. Was there ever any thought of building a racetrack by Kings Island?
Not that I'm aware of. Never heard that was under consideration.
I don't think that the two complemented each other. Now, at other parks, historically, it was very common. Ludlow Lagoon in Ludlow, Kentucky, was based around a racetrack. Beach Bend is still based around a racetrack. But I think that time had passed by the time Kings Island was built. I don't think that racetracks were the attraction that they were, especially in the early part of the 20th century, where people would come out to watch motorcycle races every single Saturday night, all summer. It's just not a thing anymore. It has its niche, of course, but it was so common back then. But do you know of anything? So when Kings Island was built originally, it was the park, it was the golf course, and it was the campground. Do you know of any other plans they had to add to the campus?
They were just going to have ultimately the tennis that they built there.
So that was,
but I never heard of the tennis.
Yeah, so that was built in like the 90s.
Down the road, right? Yeah, and a little earlier than that, in the 80s.
Oh, really?
It was there in the 80s. Yeah, because I remember working it when I was with Brendan Moore Sporting Goods. We had to go out and staff one of the tents.
I worked there for La Rosa's.
And T-shirts. Yeah, it was a fun time. But no, I don't. River Downs was interesting with Coney Island because it was walking distance. So a lot of times, like my dad and my uncle, they would go to River Downs, and the kids, we'd all be over at Coney Island, for a few hours. So back then, that kind of thing worked. But I don't know. If you put it across the street or something, I don't think you'd have that same dynamic where, kids were going to cross the freeway and go to the park or anything like that. But no, I never heard. That's the first I've ever heard of anyone even mentioning a racetrack by Kings Island.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And you're right. Like, I think that the synergy that River Downs had with Coney Island was one of convenience rather than one of necessity for one another. River Downs came much later, right? It's certainly not as old as Coney Island, but it is very historic. And I don't know. I don't really know the history of River Downs, but it's been there for a long time,
Long time.
But that's a really good question. And I'm surprised that they didn't have visions for other stuff too. I guess they did a lot when they started with the golf center, the campground, and all that. So like, what else did
College Football Hall of Fame?
Was that on their campus, or was that just adjacent to it?
That was at the end of Kings Island Drive.
Well, I know where it was, but did they own the property at the time?
It was managed by Kings Island.
Oh, it was. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember it, but I've always heard that it looked kind of like the front of the Kings Island Theater. That's what people always told me. We'll have to find a picture of it.
Yeah, there were some similarities there with that.
Yeah, vertical columns. Whatever. All right, next listener question. Alexander Stigl, whereabouts unknown. So the first piece of Kings Island related content I consumed was the Banshee announcement, either uploaded by KI Central or Coaster Force. So Greg Schei was the first VP and general manager I knew alongside Don in PR. With that being said, I'm wondering, how is Mr. Schei doing? Is he interested in eventually being on this podcast? It'd be funny if that was actually Greg Schei and he's like inviting himself on the podcast.
Well, I don't know if Greg would have interest in being on it. We'd certainly love to have him as a guest. I mean, he could talk about, that transition from, when Paramount was sold to Cedar Fair and he came in and took over, and just trying to, you know, find what each side did the best and merging it all together. I think Greg did a great job when he first came in, and managing that part of it. And the park had a lot of success during his years there. I had a lot of fun, things that we were allowed to do, the special events with, Knievel and Melinda, the haunt type stuff at the very beginning. So it was a lot of fun. But he is now the chief operating officer at Rock City, which is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He had, retired, was retired for a couple of years and then brought out of retirement to do that. But my understanding is, he's enjoying what he's doing there in Tennessee. And but maybe we'll reach out to Greg at some point and see if he'd like to come on and talk about his career with Cedar Fair and his years at Kings Island. I know for Greg, it had to be kind of a sad moment. He invested 40 years of his life with Cedar Fair. And then all of a sudden, you wake up, July 1st, July 2nd, and Cedar Fair is no more.
Yeah.
It's now Six Flags. So, I mean, when you invest that kind of time into a company and it's kind of, morphed into something else, it can't help but be a little bit sad for you.
Yeah, I think he actually put a Facebook post up on his personal Facebook about how change is difficult and it's going to be hard to get used to, but he's excited for all of his former coworkers with all the opportunity and stuff. So, Greg, if you're listening, you always have a seat at our table. We'd really appreciate it. But yeah, hey, I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.